Looking at the local market and competitive analysis is really key. What does your venue have that another one doesn't, or vice versa? Talk to those planning teams. Get them in the space, get feedback on what they're seeing in other places. If you have an amazing space and you are building it from scratch, other than what you're selling while you are still under construction, you can come out of the gate at the level that you want to be at and then still have room to increase that ceiling. It's really making sure that from the website presence to the tour experience, to how you're selling your packages and making things custom, to talking about what they get from an all-inclusive planning experience, it all really has to feel seamless in order to easily close the deal.
We document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
All right, Taryn Blake, welcome to the Venue RX podcast. I am so excited you're here today, and thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, I am super excited to be here.
It's going to be a good chat. I know you got in touch with us because of some mutual friends, someone who came on the podcast. Can you share a little bit of like how you first heard about the show?
Yeah, so my company is the exclusive planning team at Hazelwood Wedding Venue in New Oxford, Pennsylvania. So I had seen the podcast that you did with Adam and Kate, the owners out there, and that kind of, opened me up to the Venue RX podcast. And then from there, I've just been keeping in touch with the folks that you've been interviewing since.
I am so excited because of that. And I think the topic today, which is talking about, exclusive planning lists and even maybe more broadly, just the theory and the thought behind locking some of the categories of vendors to create a better experience for couples is something that, like I mentioned before we got on, we're even considering doing with the venues that we have. So really excited. Before we jump into that and kind of the nuts and bolts of your business and how you work, and your company, could you give me a little bit of a background on yourself and kind of like how you got into this industry? Why weddings? Even why Pennsylvania? Like take me back. Give me a little bit of a picture of how you got into this industry.
So the funny story about my history is that I never actually intended on being a wedding planner. It was not sort of a career plan for me. My background is that I was a director of marketing for a few multi-million-dollar companies, not in the event space, not in the hospitality space. And by nature of doing what I was doing corporately, people just started to ask me to help them on the side. Can you help plan a wedding? I did my first one. I met a DJ and he was like, hey, do you want to help somebody else? I'll give your name out. And just grew organically for about the first 7 to 8 years that I was doing it. Still, every time people would ask me, hey, are you ever going to do weddings full time? I would say, no, no, I'm not. Because that really wasn't the plan. Even though I loved it, I felt, like you're supposed to do that corporate career. Then life kind of took a turn. I had 2 kids. I got a not so great health diagnosis at one point, and I just thought, what am I doing slaving away in a cubicle every day? And kind of decided to quit right then and there on the spot and dive headfirst into a destiny that I could have a little bit more control over. And in that time frame, we went from a 2 to 3 person show doing about 30 weddings a year to now I have a team of 9 and we do over 100 weddings a year, both in the US and abroad. So have grown quite fast in the past 3 to 4 years.
Wow. That's an incredible story. And I'm curious, do you feel like there were some skills that you brought over from your work in corporate America that you were able to successfully apply to your work doing wedding planning that's given you an edge or kind of helped you even be a little bit more successful?
I would say so on the back end of my business. I really came into it having a solid understanding of marketing, PR. That's what I did professionally. So I could jump in with both feet on making sure that we had good, solid press behind us, which really helped us, I think, attract the right type of clients and grow as quick as we did. Putting together, pitches and proposals to venues specifically when we want to get work. It's been really helpful. And then in the past year or so, I've sort of transitioned along with doing the events to also doing a lot of vendor and venue consulting. And so I find that I'm able to kind of marry, wedding pun intended, my past life with my new life, and bring a lot of those, skill sets back to the table and help them organically grow their presence through just good marketing, PR, building great relationships and making sure they're getting the right people in the door.
That makes a lot of sense. Tell me about Taryn Blake Events. Are you just in-house planning for different venues? Are you, you mentioned some stuff out of country. Tell me a little bit about the actual business.
Yeah, so I have a team of 3 full-time planners on staff. And then I have subcontractors who also take on either lead wedding planning or they do coordination work for us for all of our events. Primarily, I would say about 70 to 80% of the business is in the Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia area. But we'll go wherever you want to take us. So we've planned a wedding in Ireland, which unfortunately was 2 weeks before the world shut down a few years ago. So we didn't get to see it to fruition, which was a bummer. But we have been in the Dominican. We plan across the US. So out in Utah, Louisiana, other places like that. So we're hopping. And then we throw in a couple of corporate events a year just to keep it spicy.
Awesome. I'm curious, how do people, you mentioned like, we'll go wherever you take us. How do people find you and know that they want to take you or your team to that destination place around the world instead of getting someone who's kind of local to that area?
We get a lot of personal referrals, which is great. So I would say probably about half of the business comes from venue relationships that we have. So we are on required list or preferred list. We have one exclusive that we work with and take all of their events. We get a couple, I get a lot of Instagram traffic. Every once in a while, Google, which I find still is very interesting, just because you're kind of picking a needle out of a haystack. And then personal referrals. I just got an inquiry in today where we did the bride's best friend's wedding back in 2021. And she had such a great experience as a bridesmaid that she then wanted to hire us for her wedding. So a lot of times that's how we meet people and kind of keep that cycle going. There's one group of friends, I think we're on the 7th or 8th friend pairing that's getting married. So they just kind of keep passing us around.
Kudos to you and your team. That's huge. I mean, to be able to continually give such a good experience again and again and again, where it's like, oh, you're getting married. You have to go with her team. Like that's a huge credit to your team and kind of everything that you've set up. I'm curious, what percentage of your business are you doing in venues that you're kind of like the preferred or the kind of in-house team versus, where you're traveling and you're going other places?
I would say 50 to 60% year over year. It can change, is probably where we're on a list of some sort, or we've at least worked there in the past. The other 40% are new to us venues or private estates that we're working at.
So yeah, Taryn, that makes, obviously you highly qualified to talk about what we're talking about today. At what point in your business were you starting to work with venues exclusively and kind of be their preferred in-house planner?
So it's interesting because back when I started my business, obviously, I just kind of jumped into it with both feet, but it was still, for lack of better terms, almost kind of weird to have a planner at that point, 10 years ago. Not a lot of people were using planners. Venues didn't understand how to work with us very well. It was kind of like stepping on toes. No one was really sure of their role. And as the years went on, planners became a little bit more mainstream. And I would say post-COVID, we have absolutely exploded for a variety of reasons. But exclusive, I would say probably 3 to 4 years ago was really when we started to see that turn of venues going from, sure, people are welcome to, hey, now we have a preferred list. And now it continues to whittle down from there. So the progression that I usually see is that venues will start to just put planners on a preferred list like they would with any other type of vendor. Here's our list of DJs, photographers, people who've been here. We like them. We know them. Then they start to bring it into more of a required list where they might say, you have to have somebody, and here are 5 planning teams that you have to choose from. From there, then the next step would be exclusivity, which is sort of in lieu of having an in-house team running all of your weddings, you partner up with a planning company who can then work with all of your clientele and take them, through the end.
So I'm going to ask your key kind of, USP, your unique selling proposition, right? Why is it better to work with a company like yours where you are kind of a larger planning team at scale, but then you also do exclusive partnerships? If I'm a venue coming to you, what is the value proposition for me to have you work inside our venue versus me as a venue owner trying to go out and find a couple of people who may or may not have some planning experience and then have them be my planning team?
Have you tried to hire people lately? That's my question.
compelling argument, right? We can just move to a different topic.
Right? That's it. No, the labor market has helped us. I think it's really the big thing that you can't deny is that when a lot of venues these days are looking at bringing somebody in-house, paying a full-time salary, benefits, dealing with turnover, people calling out, all of that, sometimes it can be a little bit more of a headache than going with established planning teams who you can connect with your couples from day one and you know that they're going to see it through to fruition. There are some venues that we work with who probably through no fault of their own, we have 2, 3, 4, if not more venue contacts in a span of 12 to 18 months that our clients are working with. Whereas the planning team, especially I think a small business, can kind of remain the constant for them. You also know that you are getting really consistent service if you are working with 1 to maybe 3 or 4 teams who essentially become an extension of what an in-house team would be. We know the venues inside and out. We know the policies. We can guide the clients in the right direction. So you're getting almost the best of both worlds without necessarily having to pay for the in-house, labor.
The labor piece of that is so huge. And for all of my venue owners, venue managers, even venue owner hopefuls who are listening to this or watching this, like that in my experience has been the most difficult thing, managing multiple venues is finding and keeping great people. And, it changes. Like for us, we started our business, we started managing 1 property, then 2. And really with 2, you can kind of still like keep your hands on everything. We got to the point where we were managing 6 venues and it changes the game of business. Like you're not growing the business in the same way you're doing it before you were managing people. And so that you're basically taking that piece out of it for venue owners. That's huge.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is when you work, when you have your own in-house team, sometimes I almost feel like you only know your own 4 walls, right? And unless you are a venue owner who is going out and seeking, further education or what's going on in the market, you can really start to put the blinders on and only know your space. Whereas when you partner with a company who works in 100 different venues a year, you can start to pull in parts and pieces of, what works well in another space. We'll work somewhere new for the first time. And I go back to my exclusives and say, oh my gosh, you guys, they had this amazing setup, or, they set up their suite this way, or they added this thing. It was so helpful and so beneficial. And it's like market research, boots on the ground for you, bringing back, good intel just from experiences in other places. We get to meet a ton of different vendors. I think planner partnerships too also expose you to a wider variety of clientele that you can bring in through your doors. We hear from a lot of venues that, they're looking to move up in either price point or just different styles and types of weddings, and having really strategic planner partnerships can help you get there a lot faster.
That's such a key point about having that industry exposure, because you're totally right. Venue owners and people who, even owner operators, you're not frequently going and doing anything at other venues. Like you're working your own venue, and you're totally right. It's kind of this myopic, look at your space, and maybe you're going to Wedding MBA, or you're going to, whatever the case may be, or getting some exposure online. But that's totally different to your point of just being, actually living and working in multiple spaces and being able to kind of get your venues that you are exclusive with, taking the crude benefit of that. That's huge. Yeah. So let's unpack this. I want to get really nitty gritty. When someone comes to you and says, all right, Taryn, I want to work together. Where does your service begin and end? And where does the venue's participation with your team kind of begin and end? Like, what are they responsible for? And then what are you responsible for as the exclusive in-house planning team?
It's all a little bit different. And so I just want to clarify, when you're saying exclusive, do you mean that we are on a list of, 3 that they have to pick from, or exclusive is in our Hazelwood engagement where we are one-on-one, we get every wedding?
Hazelwood engagement. So if I'm a venue owner and I'm coming to you and I'm saying, hey, like we're going to require our in-house planning team to do every single wedding, and we're going to kind of almost subcontract that through Taryn Blake Events.
Yep.
How does that, what are you taking care of? And then what's the venue take care of?
So I think that the beauty of it is that it can be really flexible to whatever they want to take on versus not. And of course, that's going to change the price and the contract terms. Specifically with Hazelwood, they have, the owners and the venue staff that take care of the venue. So they are doing, general day-to-day upkeep, their website, their social media. They do all of the tours, the selling, all that good stuff. And then they have somebody physically present on the wedding day to open the doors, make sure the lights are on, stock the bathrooms, sweep the walkways, handle anything that guests need from a venue perspective. And we really take on everything else. So we are onboarding clients into, the CRM system in the client portal, sending reminders, giving them planning questionnaires, vendor lists, budget assistance, design help, kind of the soup to nuts, the entire way through planning. And then we also take on all of that vendor work at the end. So making sure vendors understand rules and policies, creating a schedule, floor plans, collecting COIs. And then we staff the wedding day start to finish, set up through teardown, coordination, all of that. But I've seen it work in a lot of different ways too. Some venues want to be 100% hands off. And it's truly just owner and not owner operator by any means. Some like to have more of that engagement, selling it. I don't want to do venue sales at this point in my life. So it's kind of a good system that we have.
Because they're bringing in, so they're doing all the sales. They're kind of the top of the funnel, tip of the spear, whatever you want to say. And then as they bring in, their SEO, their marketing efforts are bringing the clients in, but then they're handing them over to you, and then you're helping them through the entire process.
Yeah.
So I'm curious with this, because it's a very unique style of venue management, essentially is what it is. It's hard to separate the planning side from the actual venue operations, because so much of it, like, yes, they give you the deposit, and then all of that is planning in between. And then there's the execution of the day, which is mostly execution of the planning, if done correctly. Yeah. In the industry and just with the venues that you currently work with, are you seeing a shift at all towards brides and grooms and just couples overall wanting a easier experience where they get to say, Taryn and her team know everything and they're not looking to DIY it? Or do you still get a lot of people that are trying to DIY certain elements of their wedding?
I think it depends on the overall style, budget of wedding and venue that you're looking at, right? DIY weddings are never going to go away. Mm-hmm. It is just always going to be a thing, right? Weddings that cost $100,000, $500,000, $1 million are also never going to go away. So there's a really big spectrum of where weddings can fall and kind of the wants and wish list of all of the couples. I would say the majority of clients that we are working with at this point do not fall in the DIY category. They're people who are very much willing to pay for an experience where they can be hands-on in decision-making, but hands-off in pretty much everything else, and especially the wedding weekend. And I think one of the transitions that we've really seen and things that we hear from our clients pretty often is that they do want that all-inclusive experience, not just for themselves, but for their parents, for their wedding parties. We get a lot of inquiries from folks that say, I've been a bridesmaid 6 times and I'm so tired of working on the wedding day. So I need a planner who is not going to make my people work. And so there has definitely been, I think, more of a shift. But again, I don't think DIY weddings are going anywhere. I just don't know that they're always the best fit for a hands-on full service planning team. There are planners who cater to a DIY market. And that's, the type of clientele that they specialize in working with, not necessarily the clientele that we're working with at this point.
So given that, is there a price point that you generally see couples kind of being all in when they're utilizing this sort of I mean, it is an all-inclusive model, but it's kind of modified because the venue owner is working with another outsourced company. So even though it's like a vendor, it's really not. You're part of the venue. Is there a budget that you kind of see, or even like a rough range?
In our general area, I would say the venues that either have exclusive planning or are requiring planners, all in full wedding budgets, it would be hard to hit anything below 50. It's not unusual for us to see 6-figure weddings, but I don't think you have to be there necessarily to get that full service experience. And again, I'm working in Pennsylvania, Maryland. If you put me in New York City or you put me somewhere in California, those numbers are going to be very different. But for our general area, I would say if you're in the 50 to 70 range, you can get a solid venue, a really good vendor team, and have a planner on board and really bring a nice wedding to life.
That's awesome. That's a really good, and I would even say like interesting point of reference as far as the price goes, because we're here in Southern California. I'm talking on the podcast to venue owners who are in Texas, Oklahoma, Utah, all over the country basically, and hearing about the different price points. I think sometimes venue owners, there's kind of a price that you set when you're starting out, and then you get you raise from there, but still, you might feel like, gosh, like a $70,000 wedding is like, so expensive versus you might get, somewhere else is like, it's pretty affordable, how many weddings do you do per year at some of the venues that you're exclusive at?
So I would say our max is probably around 40 at at our exclusive. We might get 20 to 25 at some others. So it's nice. It's repeat business, and it's mutually beneficial on our end as well. Knowing that we're going to be having that repeat business come in. My planning team loves it because they're comfortable. It's easy, easy in relative terms of planning weddings every day. So it's not bad.
I think though, you said easy, and I know you put that in quotations, but it allows you to be efficient, it sounds like, and kind of build in those efficiencies. So this is awesome. This is really interesting. How, as you're considering scaling and considering kind of the future and things like that, how are you growing? Are you looking to kind of work with more venues exclusively, or are you looking to just work at more venues in the area?
I don't think I would ever go 100% exclusive across the board. Mostly just because it keeps the creative juices flowing. There's excitement being able to travel to new spaces, and there's constantly new and amazing venues that are opening up. And so I don't know that I would want to fulfill all of my planners' time in an exclusive. However, responding to the market and kind of looking at scaling business, it's always nice to know what's coming in. So when we work with venues exclusively, we sign 1 year to 2 year contracts with that venue. So I can essentially then project out and say, hey, I've got 40 to 80 weddings at this revenue amount that's already preset coming into my business. That allows me to plan, and then I can hire more people to take on those weddings elsewhere. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an edge in the market, not having to wait for every single booking to come in. And it's funny because we're seeing the market turn, I think, in my area a little bit. Just in the past 2 weeks, I actually have a meeting with a venue next week that wants to talk about exclusivity, and another one that's toying around the idea. They have 2 venues and they do about 160 weddings a year. So that alone would be at least 2 more full-time team members on my team to take on those events.
Totally. When you say the market turning a little bit, could you explain and kind of like expand on that?
I think just the challenges that have really hit the market since COVID, right? Cost of doing business, inflation, the labor market being hard to find, salaries that people are asking for these days in the hospitality industry. It is all really, I think, starting to stack up on, some venue owners, especially those that have been in the game for a long time. It looks very different today than it did 10 years ago. And so I think that as planners become more of, a more common vendor, let's say, right? We're not the extra, we're not the add-on like we used to be. We're now part of that core vendor team. they're starting to see that it's just making more sense to establish those relationships. And even if it's not on an exclusive basis, even just narrowing down a list or requiring a planning team in general can help you save so much, I think, in overhead and on the back end on the venue side, that they're really just starting to see purely from a numbers perspective. It makes sense.
I'm curious to dig into the details of how a venue would go about, finding a planning team and things like that. Before we do that, I'm curious about what you're actually offering. Like, planning can take so many different forms. You have your day of planners that are really more like month of planners. You've got partial planning, you've got full package planning where you're starting, at the very beginning, sometimes even before the venue gets selected. Where do you lie on that spectrum, and what options do your clients have? And I think I'm curious in general, but specifically because we are the Venue RX here, kind of in your work with the exclusive relationships that you have.
So typically, whether we are exclusive or on a required list, everything sort of starts at that base coordination level. In-house for me, coordination is 90 days out minimum. We will not go less than that. So I don't take on day of, I don't take on month of. It is 90 days to get our ducks in a row, make it as enjoyable for the vendors and the venue team as it is for the couples and my planners. From there, the couples have every option to add on. So if you get a coordination package included, you have the option to upgrade to a partial planning package. You could go full service. You could add on design. Any of those things that'll really make it, a better experience in whatever the couple is looking for. I would say too, venue by venue, that coordination package can take on a little bit of a different feel. So we have some venues that would say, okay, in this coordination package, we want 12 hours of service. We want a day of rehearsal, which, by the way, if venues are not doing day of rehearsals at this point, you are missing out. That is like my next crusade in this industry, day of rehearsals all the way, if you have a planner on board. They could say, the planner is responsible for always having 2 people here. You need to be on site at hair and makeup. Some say you don't have to be on site for hair and makeup. So the venues kind of give you a parameter to work in. And there's a little bit of a negotiation back and forth for what works for them, what works for your process, what works for the overall price, who's paying the cost, is the venue paying it, is the couple paying it. But once you settle on it, it's kind of nice because then the expectations are set and everybody just executes from there.
For the exclusive, and also you said so many things that I wanted. There's I need a note. I normally have my notepad with me, but so for the typical use case, if there is such a thing at this point, of exclusive relationships with venues, are you finding that they're rolling the cost of planning into the venue and they're saying, hey, to get married at our property is, I'm just going to use easy numbers, 10 grand, and 10 grand is going to cover the site fee of $8,000 plus a $2,000 90-day wedding package. That's the minimum, and they can add on to that, something like that?
I'm seeing it both ways. So there are a few different venues in my area that have an exclusive partnership. Okay. And they don't all do it the same. So, the exclusive that my company is a part of. Good. Okay. So the exclusive that my company is a part of, everything is rolled into that fee. So when they pay that venue cost, they automatically get coordination services as part of that, with options to add on later if they would choose. There are other venues in the area that have one planning company that works with them exclusively, but you pay the venue cost and then you pick a package with the planning team. To me, it just kind of comes down to how they want to market their space. Are they trying to get people in the door by showing a venue cost that is less than others? Or is their marketing approach, that we are all inclusive and you don't have to buy the venue and then also buy, a planner on top of it?
I do. You're totally right. I do see it both ways. Like, you could have, you're almost showing it. It totally depends on your marketing strategy and how you want to be set up. Because in both ways, you're going to be, like in my kind of silly example, the 8,000 and the 2,000, you're either showing a $10,000 rental or you're showing an $8,000 rental with a mandatory $2,000 minimum $2,000 add-on. Yeah.
It's interesting to see. Some venues will use the planning company as sort of the value add. The exclusive that we're with, they talk about us by name. Our pictures are in their advertising. they really wanted to capitalize on the name that we had already built to help establish, early credibility and just say, hey, here's this team that you're getting as part of the venue package. There are other venues that have exclusive planning teams, but you will never see their names listed as far as who they are separately from the venue. They even wear venue name tags when they're on site. So that's kind of a unique and interesting dynamic in it as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the branding here in a second, but before we do that, I want to call back to something that you said about the day of rehearsals. For anyone who does not know, that was kind of like, wait, what's she talking about? What are you talking about? I know you said you're passionate about it. Share a little bit about what you mean around the rehearsal piece there.
Yeah. So I am all about doing things that make people's lives easier. Our clients being the biggest benefactor of that. So doing 600 weddings at this point in my career, there's one pain point that we started to see over and over and over, and that was scheduling rehearsals. Because if you're a venue that does Friday, Saturday, Sunday weddings, you're pretty much looking at a Thursday to get people on site. A Thursday rehearsal for a Saturday or Sunday wedding, people can't take off work. Somebody's always running late. They undoubtedly overlap with hotel check-ins. It's so much for the couple to try to juggle on the back end. That the same things would happen, right? You get on site, somebody's on the phone yelling at their sister because she's stuck in traffic. She's not going to be there. Everybody wants to talk. It just becomes a stress. And again, on the venue side, you're paying for people to open your space, turn on the lights, be there for a couple of hours, chase people out at the end of it, all that good stuff. So we started to pitch it to our clients and to some venues that we work with. Just let us handle this the day of the wedding. So the day before, no matter what day you're getting married, you host a welcome dinner. It doesn't have to be a rehearsal dinner. That's old tradition, right? You host a welcome dinner. Everybody shows up at a schedule that works for everyone. You connect, everyone can chat. There's no working. It's just such a great time. And then when you show up on the wedding day, everybody can put that work hat on and really get down to business. The way that we like to structure it is that when hair and makeup is taking their 20 to 30 minutes in the morning to set up, we take one part of the party out and we'll do a rehearsal with them. When the second part of the party arrives later, we'll rehearse with them. It takes about 10 minutes. It's super easy. If the couple wants to rehearse together with everybody on site, we will put that into the daily schedule that we can do it after all formal photos are done and before guests arrive. So you're in the space. Everybody feels super comfortable, but it really allows it to be a seamless experience. About 80% of our couples are doing this now, and we have not had one negative review about it from couples or venues.
I was going to say just that's sounding really attractive right now for some of the problems that you very well captured. Yeah, it's always the Thursday. Like for our busier venues that are running Friday, Saturday, Sundays, one of our venues does about 120 weddings per year. We also have a venue that does 30 per year. For those, it's a little bit easier, but for the ones that you're really like pushing out a lot of weddings, you have to capitalize on all that time. And you're totally right. The labor and having someone go out to the property. And if it's a kind of a remote property, that is a little bit more challenging than, if you have a property that's closer to the city. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You kind of see that people panic when you first mention it. And a lot of times it's just because it's something new, right? It's change. We'll hear the pushback from parents sometimes. It's like, well, everybody always has a rehearsal and, but things change in weddings. We're not all doing bouquet tosses and garter removals anymore either. So like some older traditions can kind of slide to make way for a new way of doing things. And like I said, any of the venues that have tried it, not one has gone back. And it's a little fresher, I can imagine, because if you night before, day before, even 2 days before, like you have a Saturday wedding and you're doing your rehearsal on a Thursday, you've got a couple of days of probably like drinking, hanging out, all the different things. And you're showing up day of the wedding kind of like, oh man, where was I supposed to stand? And you're probably reviewing some of that stuff anyway with the people when you don't do it. So that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Taryn, help me understand the branding and the kind of the relationship that you have with Taryn Blake Events and that brand that you've created, and then the relationship that you have with the venue, and even let's say Hazelwood, like they have their grant that they're, carving out and showcasing and all that. I heard this quote: branding is the consistent action of associating the unknown with the known, right? So we're like associating things that we know and we're familiar with, and I'm doing that with your brand, Taryn Blake Events, and then I'm doing that with Hazelwood, or I'm doing that with whoever else. When it comes to those two brands overlapping, how do you handle that? Like which brand is kind of on display, who's getting the credit, things like that?
I would say venues take the lead. And I prefer it that way because I think as a planner, especially one where we have exclusive relationships with venues, it's my job to make them look good, right? It's all an ecosystem. And my planner, all of the planners who work for me also know that we keep our venues happy, just like we keep our clients happy. And sometimes, we still have to advocate on behalf of our client with a venue, but you still, respect that relationship that you have. With the exclusive, Hazelwood is obviously the brand, and then it's exclusive planning provided by Taryn Blake Events. I think that it can differ depending on what that partnership looks like and who's coming together. My brand had already been in existence for a decade when Hazelwood came into the picture. So we had a following, I had credibility, I had press. Anybody who was going to Google Hazelwood and TBE is going to find just, all positive things. So I think in that case, it can be beneficial. If you're partnering with somebody who is maybe newer or doesn't, have a lot of experience under their belt, that might look a little bit different. And you might play up one part of that brand, over another.
Do you view that when someone starts working together with you, that they have to lock or kind of start making other pieces of their vendor list exclusive as well? Or do you work as an exclusive planner at venues that also allow more of a blank canvas style?
I prefer if we have a little bit more control over a catering list. I will say that. Okay. It's usually the biggest variable in the wedding day. All the other vendors, you can get to play nice, right? It's little parts and pieces. And overall, I will say this: when folks are working with a planner, most of our weddings, I'm seeing familiar faces that are coming from our vendor list. If people like us and they trust us, they are taking our recommendations and running with it. So we do get a lot of, pull in the vendors that they're bringing on board in good ways. But it's always the caterers. The caterers are the ones that can throw a wrench into it. And I think I like when venues have a catering list. I think venues like when they have a catering list, they're nervous at first, right? Because I think anytime they feel like they're going to put a parameter on a couple, that the couples are going to say, we don't want to book here. Yeah. But that's really not the case. It is truly not the case. And it just allows you to create a better overall experience for your couple. That's what I think about even requiring a planner. You are being an advocate for the couples that are choosing to work with you because as the venue owner, what's best for them. You've seen this play out, 100 different ways. Having their friends and family work on their wedding day and being stressed out and all that stuff really isn't worth it if you're trying to create, the best experience possible. So yeah, long way of saying I really like an exclusive catering list, but the rest we can work with.
Totally.
And I'm one, as a planner, I feel like it's my job to tell you if people don't do a good job.
Yeah.
So we'll do that.
I'm curious. So I think you made a really good point earlier that I think there's maybe this like clearing out of the middle, and you're always going to have those super budget weddings and you're always going to have the super luxury weddings because people are always going to get married. The question is like, how much money are they going to spend? Are they going to really go for it, or are they going to go to barely one step above going to the courthouse? Right.
Yeah.
And so I've certainly seen both sides of that at all of our properties. We've got a property that will sometimes get people saying, I have a $15,000 budget for the whole wedding. And then you'll get, another property and they have 70 or 80 or 90,000. And it's a different experience that we provide in both scenarios. But I'm curious, do you think that there is a way, like for a venue listening to this right now, that's maybe charging $5,000, $6,000 for the venue rental? They're getting some of those more like budget brides. And it's the scariest thing in the world to think about a price bump and then also changing their clientele, because essentially they're not going to be working with the $15,000 couple when they're going to require someone to your caliber to do the planning, plus locking some other lists and some of those different things. Like the budget's going to go up to 40,000 pretty quick.
Yeah.
Can you give some words of wisdom or advice, or maybe even just give them some courage, or maybe even the tactical way of like how to make that transition over to working with a clientele that has a little bit higher budget?
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where you have to be ready to commit 100%, because you could raise your venue fee, but if the experience doesn't come with it, there's still going to be a disconnect. And it's also remembering that the wedding industry is running on a kind of a 12 to 18 month delay. So what, the policies or the changes that you put in place today, you're really not going to see the outcome of that for another 12 to 18 months, unless you're going to grandfather in all of the, the couples that you already have, which is very doubtful. So it takes time. We hear from a lot of venues that they do want to raise prices. They do want to, move into, I don't like to use the word luxury unless we really are talking about high dollar weddings, but maybe a middle market wedding, middle market budget. And that takes some steps to build on, because your marketing is all still going to look like the weddings you're doing today. So if the weddings you're doing today are all very DIY focused, they are maybe that $15,000 budget, that's going to be a hard sell to an $80,000 or $90,000 client, just based on what they're seeing. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some intentional marketing. But I do, again, think if you put the right planning team on board, if that's the direction you're going, you can kind of use that as a springboard into that new market and kind of a new brand in itself, right? Still the same venue name, but it's definitely going to be a new experience, which kind of does change the way that you would market and brand the space. So it's going to take time. Not going to be an overnight. But I think all around strategic partnerships, showing specific people in your space, talking to a new type of client will pay off, as long as everything else in the venue kind of raises to meet that.
Have you seen that happen where maybe the amount of weddings, like the number of weddings, reduces because the price point went up? So maybe instead of booking 80, someone's booking 60 now. They are making a little bit more money per wedding, but they are booking less. Have you seen that happen kind of as part of this metamorphosis?
I don't know that I can confidently say I have, just because I don't know what anybody's books look like on the back end. Okay. But what I can tell you is the venues that we maybe started dipping our toe in the water with 5 to 6 years ago are booking just the same amount, if not more, weddings at a higher price point. So just personal experience, I would say I have not seen anybody kind of, go down in weddings. Now, only difference would be there are some venues that offer lodging, and, I think the trend there is that they're trying to book full weekends out at a much higher amount than doing 3 one-day weddings. But no, I just personal anecdotes, I would say I'm not seeing any of that downturn, but I can't say that for, sure.
So in the same vein as that, I'm wondering, again, with that transition, do you think some venues just can't get to that price point because of the actual physical product? Like planning, you could do a better job, right? You can be more professional, or you can include different elements in planning and things like that. And you can elevate your service kind of by your own bootstraps, right? With a venue, in some cases, unless you're investing money into the property, you may not be able to charge more. Is that resonate with your experience?
It does. I'm in rural Pennsylvania, so I am in the middle of barn wedding country. I might do 2 barn weddings a year. It is very slim to none. But, there's a lot of venues around me that don't have indoor bathrooms. They don't have climate control. So yeah, unless they're willing to make a very large capital investment, those things aren't going to change. And so they're just not going to be able to charge a higher price for their venue. But it doesn't mean that they can't provide an amazing planning experience, because just like there's venues at all levels, there are planners at all levels. What I charged when I first started is vastly different than what I charge in the experience that, we give now. And every venue has different goals. Every planner has different goals. So I think that there's always going to be a good fit that you can still elevate the client experience without necessarily having to max out what people are willing to pay, to be in your space.
Really, really good feedback. And I love having this conversation because you're bringing perspective on it from such a close proximity to the venue side of things, but with that experience of kind of transitioning through your own business and what you charged. Mm-hmm. So let's say you have a brand new venue owner, or even someone who's listening to this podcast that's like, hey, I really want to start a venue, and there's a venue for sale, in my area or whatever. And they're looking at it and they're currently charging for $5,000. And I listened to Taryn Blake, and I want to hire this Taryn Blake event, similar style company that I've had my eye on Instagram or whatever in this area. And I want to increase that $5,000 or $6,000 rental rate to $9,000, $12,000, whatever, and kind of start catering more to the $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 weddings. In your mind, what is the order of operations of what they need to do to kind of start elevating the experience if they were to get into a property like this that needed to be elevated?
Yeah. So sort of the process that we walk through with people who are in this exact same situation. And I work with people who are real estate investors, who, are trying to buy venue spaces. Looking at the local market and competitive analysis is really key. What does your venue have that another one doesn't, or vice versa? Second is talk to those planning teams. Get them in the space, get feedback on what they're seeing in other places that you either, again, do or don't have. I think having a really strong brand and target market right out of the gate is super important, because I think sometimes people think, we have to start here and build, which can be true. But I also think if you have an amazing space and you are building it from scratch, other than what you're selling while you are still under construction, you can come out of the gate at the level that you want to be at, and then still have room to increase that ceiling. But it's really making sure, I think, holistically, that from the website presence to the tour experience to how you're selling your packages and making things custom to talking about what they get from an all-inclusive planning experience, it all really has to feel seamless in order to easily close the deal for some of those higher dollar, clients. Because really, they're not just touring one venue usually. They're touring multiple spaces. And so there is still competition there, but it's just knowing what's really going to set you apart from all of that.
You said higher dollar clients, then you said seamless experience. And then I know you mentioned a couple of pieces in there, the tour, website, things like that. Are you seeing that higher dollar clients like more inclusive options, or they like more customizable options? And the key is it's seamless either way.
I don't know that there is really anybody who's leaning. Like, I couldn't say, it's 80% in one side, 20% in the other. I think that people do just want customization, right? Even though, every couple is pretty much going on Pinterest and finding inspiration in what they want, nobody wants a carbon copy. And we're seeing a lot of couples now that it's not just about making the wedding look pretty. It's about having their wedding tell a story. We're infusing so many personal details, making it feel very just intentional and unique to the couple that, pretty space aside, they want to be able to do what they want to be able to do with it. But yeah, I feel like I could talk all day about all the things that make for a good venue experience versus not good venue experience. But these days, I feel like couples just want to make sure that everything is very focused and intentional for what their goals and needs are, and not just, a cookie cutter of, we only do, modern weddings, or we really cater to more of that rustic type of atmosphere, because you can make any space into anything.
So true. With probably the right planning team, design team, like having some of those elements, you can dress up a space. I know just the difference of like uplighting, DJ's uplight packages, it transforms a space in a really incredible ways. That's so interesting. You nodded briefly to, you said you could talk all day on what makes for a really good venue experience. You do a little bit of venue consulting. You said you mentioned you worked with real estate investors and things like that. Tell me a little bit about that side of what you do.
So specifically on the consulting side, I see it almost broken into two separate parts. We work with some real estate investors or folks who just want to become a venue owner, whether they're looking at buying a space, building a space, and they bring us on board to talk through everything from just conceptual plans through actually getting architectural drawings and laying out, what's the best flow for a space? How does it work in the local area that you're trying to build something? Because looking at venues that are in different parts of the country might look very pretty, but they might not be practical for where you are. So we work through a lot of things like that. We also work with a lot of existing venue owners who feel like they're stuck. They either aren't attracting as many clients as they used to. They feel like, for some reason, they're just losing out on tours to maybe a new competitor in town. And they really bring us in to just talk through strategy, process. What are we seeing other venues doing? What is this experience that we're seeing on a broader scale? What are our clients telling us that we want? Because I think it's one of the best things about what I do, having the planning company first, is that at any given time, I have 100 to 250 clients real time in the mix. We're talking to couples getting married today, and I get to see all of the contracts, the rules, the regulations, the feedback from hundreds of vendors and venues. So the intel and kind of, all of that market research is just coming to us on a silver platter, and I get to digest all of that and then hand it right back to people and saying, this isn't a white paper from couples that were surveyed 3 years ago. This is what couples who are booking venues today are telling us and what they're looking for and how to make it better. And then we put the parts and pieces together with the right industry connections. So if you have a venue that, your goals are that you want higher dollar designs in the space, I can connect you with very specific designers that can help you make that happen. Say you get feedback about your suites not being, user friendly. I'm going to put you in contact with the best hair and makeup teams to come in and show you this is where the lighting should be. This is how you sell it to a couple. This is what's important. So it's really just filling in those gaps that you just might not have had exposure to.
Totally. And might not know until you've had someone who's been able to synthesize the information, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
Taryn, I want to wrap up with two questions today. And I'm curious, competition that you mentioned, is it something that venue owners need to be concerned about? Or is it something that if they're marketing and they are kind of correctly understanding their own value proposition, that they don't need to be worried about?
I'm a believer that you really don't have to worry about competition. Yeah, could it make a ding, in your bottom line for a little bit? Somebody new comes in and you see a couple of leads going a certain direction that maybe they didn't before. Yes, but if you shift your focus away from focusing on that competition and to bringing in more qualified leads, up-leveling your experience, trying to get people to see your venue as a destination, you can far, make up for losing a couple of leads to somebody else. I think that wedding trends and venues and, all of that, it's constantly shifting. And we're seeing couples travel from far outside of the local area to a lot of these high dollar venues to get married. So your potential pool of couples, I think, is sometimes a lot larger than what some venues think it is.
That's huge for kind of maybe blowing the lid off of some limiting beliefs that might have. The last piece is just about, budgets. There's this kind of rumor and word around the industry about this engagement gap. I think there was a CNN article that, talked about David's Bridal and, some of the different things that have happened in our industry. There's talks of a recession, inflation, interest rates probably going up through the end of the year. There's all sorts of different things like that people are hearing. So how much of an impact do you feel like this is actually having on couples? Like you said, a couple hundred couples that you're dealing with that are getting married and booking weddings today. Are you seeing this has a big impact, or is that more noise in the kind of wedding environment?
Honestly, I think it's a little bit of both. I always try to tell vendors, when they ask me or come to us is like, oh my gosh, our booking, we're not booking as fast and we don't know what's going on. I'm like, were you in business in 2017? Because it's just kind of how it was, It's almost feeling a little bit more like the norm. But I feel like there was such an influx of people into the industry starting businesses post-COVID that they've only really known the boom. And, for all of us old timers, we're like, oh, it will come, But that said, I do think, not all of that data is just made up or pulled out of thin air. There are some venues that are struggling with bookings right now. But again, to me, you have two choices. You can sit where you're at and just say that you're struggling, or you can start putting things into action today that are going to just set you up, with the best way possible to try to overcome that. If you have dates that are left over at the end of the year, put the strategy in place now to capitalize on last minute bookings. Start pulling in couples that maybe are experiencing the crunch of budget and everything else on the home front. Market Wednesday weddings. People are getting married on the weekdays still. So find ways that you can do something different to capitalize on what's happening in the market right now. I think it's not the time to sit around and wait, that's for sure, because by then it's going to be too late.
And does different ever include like slashing your prices, offering discounts, things like that? Or are you more of a proponent of adding value versus subtracting price?
I love adding value. To that end, I am a person that fully believes that in your gut what's best for your business. I would never tell anybody slash prices across the board. I think that's really hard to come back from. But I also think that if you have an opportunity, let's say a couple shows up and they have an impeccable vision and they already have a high dollar designer on board that could do amazing things for your space. It's just little things that if you're like, this is a bucket list wedding for me, you might customize that proposal a little bit differently than if you would, just a run of the mill for your type of venue, type of experience. I also think that it's completely okay to test the waters sometimes. If you find that you're hitting roadblock after roadblock on bookings, change your price by $300. See if it moves the needle. If you're finding that you are booking an exponentially higher number of couples by making a little change, maybe instead of being $5,200, you're $4,975. To me, it's worth it.
Totally. And it's not a huge jump if it means that you're booking 2 or 3 extra weddings a month that you weren't going to get anyway, because perception wise, you were hitting that less than $5,000 mark. That's great advice. That's awesome.
And I think too, it's just important to keep in mind that our clientele is, we're constantly replacing clients. So somebody who's looking at your website and seeing, a $10,000 price tag today is probably not going to be the same person who's looking at your website in 6 months, seeing a $99.99 price tag. And it's not going to be the same person 6 months after that. So it's okay to try things out and shift a little bit from a marketing perspective, because you can always change it back.
Fair. Taryn, I want to share something here that just is a personal thing that I've experienced at some of the 5 venues, and it's relevant on this point. Normally I don't do this, but I just want to share this piece. I found out the hard way, if you do that publicly, if you shift prices publicly too close, you get sometimes those couples that already had booked with you that come back and they say, hey, can I take advantage of the special as well? And so I want to encourage, just off of the pain that I've experienced, that if you're going to modify pricing at all, that you do so kind of in person with the couple or on their proposal. If you want it, if you really want that couple, like you said, it's a bucket list wedding, or you really want that couple to get married there, you can offer them a $300 or $500 discount, or throw something in that you normally would charge for to get them to book. But if you put that on your Instagram and say, hey, $500 off for anyone who books in the next 5 days, the people who just booked 5 days before are going to hit you up and be like, hey, so about that $500 discount that I saw out there for everyone.
Yes.
And that'll actually hurt you more than help you.
Yeah, so. I agree. I love adding things that aren't necessarily dollar driven. Maybe they get an extra hour at the venue, right? You just open an hour earlier. It's a little bit, costs on your end, but probably not as much as giving them $500 or $1,000 off.
Yep. $20, $60, whatever labor costs. Yeah. Totally. Awesome. Taryn, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been so fun just chatting about this. And, if someone is interested in reaching out to you and kind of hearing more how you developed exclusive partnerships on the planner side or on the venue side, what's the best place to reach out to you at?
Through my website, TarynBlakeEvents.com, or email Taryn at Taryn Blake Events. I'm on all the socials. So pretty much any place you want to find me, you can find us.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's really been a pleasure chatting.
Yeah, excited. Thank you.